And now to Dan McTeague, president of Canadians for Affordable Energy, who joined us earlier for our weekly energy update. All yours, Dan.
Well, Teresa, thank you very much. And this has been one of the most exciting weeks on the energy front that we've seen in a very, very long time. Of course, I'm referring to the threat of tariffs being imposed on Canada, what that would have looked like this time last week. Would it be 25% for everything, including our energy prices? As it turned out, it was a bit of a split decision at the beginning, 25% for everything, but only 10% for oil, likely due to the intervention of Premier Daniel Smith. The number was a lot lower, not because they were doing any favors for Alberta, but in fact, Alberta and our energy sector is extremely important to the United States as far as energy security is concerned. Look, Alberta produces a lot of heavy oil. The United States doesn't produce much. In fact, it produces none. Its tight shale oil production is great for gasoline, but can't produce diesel, which you need for your military, which you need for your aviation sector, agriculture sector, mining, and transport sector. So all this means that Canada may have dodged a bullet, at least for the next 20 or so days, but it would appear that it has renewed some idea that the Canadian dollar is very much attached at the hip to the price of energy. We saw Canadian dollar lose more traction on Sunday night into Monday morning, dropped to about 148 pennies to buy a US dollar. When there was a reprieve, it came back to 143. That in and of itself, Teresa, means about a 5 cent a liter savings for most Canadians. Why? Well, because with GST and HST, the weak Canadian dollar that's not trading at par with the US greenback for whatever reason, and there's a lot of them, mostly due to the fact that there's not much attracting investments into Canada, therefore buying Canadian dollars, leads to about a 25 to 27 cent a liter loss in our purchase power. It's costing you and I 25 to 27 cents a liter because the Canadian dollar is very weak. What that really means is that across the country, we did see over an average a bit of a blip in prices. Let's start with Vancouver, the Lower Mainland, Victoria, and of course, British Columbia. Those regions saw an average increase of about 6 cents a liter, much of that due to the fact that the clean fuel standard in that province continues to be extraordinarily expensive. That's only one of the two carbon taxes that we have. So that's about 18, 19 cents a liter. We also saw the weakness in the Canadian dollar and some disturbance on the US West Coast as it relates to refinery outages, especially in San Francisco. But that aside, it means that if we're looking at $1.92, $1.93 for fuel in Vancouver and in 188 in Victoria, 189, and about 170 to 175 in the BC interior, so Kelowna, Kamloops, Prince George, etc. Look for those prices to go up, perhaps very modestly, perhaps on average another penny, but they'll drop before they go back up, likely by Wednesday or Thursday of next week. For Alberta, a bit of a decrease. They saw prices drop to about $1.40 in Calgary, $1.33, $1.34 in Edmonton. Prices should remain pretty much range bound within that same area. Same for Saskatchewan at $1.52. That would be, of course, Regina and Saskatoon. Winnipeg saw a big increase, but that increase had a lot to do this week with retailers finally charging a retail margin. They were operating on zero, which is impossible to operate on unless you're selling a lot of, as I like to say, beef jerky and coffee and whatever. There isn't enough margin in those to make up losses when you're having to pay 2 and 3 cents a liter for loyalty programs, credit cards, and of course the cost of electricity to turn on your pumps. Ontario saw an increase at the beginning of the week, and that came right back down about 5 cents a liter. We look for an increase of about 2 cents a liter this week on average, more or less by this time next week, as opposed to earlier in the week. We actually might see prices drop 2 cents a liter between now and, of course, Monday. Of course, in Quebec, it follows Ontario because it's the same market, the New York Harbor market, and that price would follow exactly the same, except that it's about 10 cents a liter more because they have more taxes in Quebec. And for the Maritimes, Atlantic Canada, you saw a bit of a decrease, an average of 1.5, 2 cents a liter for both diesel and gasoline. You're likely to see prices move up a little bit next week. But what's really critical here isn't, Teresa, so much the price for gasoline, it's diesel. Because there's been significant demand on diesel, heating oil, and natural gas and propane, it looks like we're going to continue to see pressure on diesel prices that could go up as much as 6 cents a liter right across the country from coast to coast by this time next week. That's because there's a cold snap that seems to be extending the drawdown in inventories and supplies in the United States. And that's going to show up likely by this time next week or on Wednesday when the weekly inventory report comes out from the Department of Energy of the U.S. Government. So all in all, for this time of year, we normally don't see prices move up, We sometimes tend to see them fall, but generally speaking, this is a year unlike any other. And I think 2025 is going to turn out to be a lot more expensive than 24 and certainly 23. Energy markets have been behaving in a very different way, driven by money managers who've been investing all their money in AI and technology. Those are interesting areas to put your money in for, obviously, for the future, but you can't get rid of the fundamentals. And I think fundamentals are going to reign extraordinarily important for the economy and for the price of energy. That's why I'm suggesting a few things are coming down the road. On April 1st, I know it sounds like a long way away, but when you think about it, it's only 5, 6, 7 weeks away. We have the increase in carbon taxes, 4 cents a liter across the board from coast to coast. Then on the 15th of April, we're going to see the switch back from winter blends of gasoline, which are cheaper to make and to sell, to more expensive to make summer blends of gasoline. That could mean a 4 or 5 cent increase. I also suspect that the idea that China has plenty of supply and demand is very low is just not to be believed. Countries like China, countries particularly in the Pacific Rim, are going to continue to use a lot more energy, and for that, they're going to need a lot more oil, a lot more gas. And of course, with the Trump administration sanctioning Iran, further likely Russia, Venezuela, it's likely we may go back to the scenario I remember working in 2016 to 2020, doing a lot of American media, where you're going to find that will have an upward push on prices, no matter what President Trump suggests he wants to do with energy, as far as energy security is concerned. One thing is very clear, Teresa: the United States cannot proceed with energy, self-sufficiency unless it involves Canada one way or another. I think it's a very strong point for Canada to continue to make. That was expressed by Premier Donald Smith, as I said at the beginning, and it's been very successful up to this point in ensuring that Canada can somehow mitigate some of the sanctions that we might see at the beginning of March, if at all. I'm confident that is a very important point for Canada to play, but let's understand we need to sell more energy to the rest of the world. That means more building of pipelines, and net zero folks can stand aside. That's it, Teresa. Talk to you next week.